We take about 20,000 breaths every day. Most of the time we don't think about it, but air is the ultimate neutral backdrop. It's supposed to be invisible, tasteless, and life-giving. But in December of 1952, for the people of London, that air turned into something else. It became an object. It became weight. For 5 days, the very thing that kept the city alive started to kill it. This wasn't just a weather event or a rare phenomenon. It was a collision between an ancient city's habits and a rare atmospheric trap. We call it the Great Smog, or the Killer Smog. But that sounds almost too clinical for what it actually was. A 5-day blackout caused by the breath of the city itself. To understand why this happened, we have to look at the sky. Post-war London was a city powered by coal. It was in the stoves of every home and the furnaces of every factory. On December 4th, an anticyclone, a high-pressure weather system, settled over the Thames Valley. This stalled the wind, leaving the city's air completely stagnant. Under normal conditions, the sun warms the ground, which warms the air directly above it. This warm air naturally rises, carries pollen away into the upper atmosphere. However, on this night, the sky was clear, which allowed the ground to lose heat rapidly through a process called radioactive cooling. The air touching the ground became ice cold, while a layer of warmer air remained high above it.
Yeah, so temperature inversion under normal conditions is the warm air is typically closer to the ground, which allows for the top layer for it to rise up and kind of carry the pollutants all the way up to the atmosphere. But in 1952, there was an anticyclone over London, which inverted the temperature, so the cold air was trapped under the warm air, and the warm air served as kind of a ceiling or a lid per se. And so all the pollutants like coal fires, all the factories, the bus pollutants, all that got trapped, which created the smog and the fog, which ended up killing many people from that overall.
But this wasn't your ordinary run-of-the-mill smoke. It was a self-perpetuating aerosol of acid and soot. The soot particles acted as a catalyst, which accelerated the acid formation, while the moisture kept the poison suspended exactly where 8 million people were trying to breathe and live. Now, this was over the span of just one day, but by the second day, the smog had swallowed the entire city. This is where the story shifts from a simple, rare weather phenomenon to a survival horror. Now, during this second day, visibility in many of the neighborhoods dropped to about less than a foot. Some would say if you held your hand out, you couldn't even see your own fingers in front of you. But people would describe the color as a sickly, oily yellow, which then earned the nickname pea souper. But of course, it didn't taste like soup, it tasted like metal and soot. But of course, the city simply stopped. Public transport was abandoned, drivers couldn't see the road or even the people in front of them they were picking up. There are even accounts of bus conductors walking in front of their vehicles holding flaming torches just to find the curb. But the smog was so fine that it didn't stay outside. It started seeping through cracks in window frames and even crawling under doors like some invisible killer. But even in theaters, the smog was so thick inside the buildings that the audience couldn't see the stage. Performances were canceled because the actors were coughing too hard to speak their lines. Even the animals felt it. At the Smithfield Cattle Show, prize-winning cows began to choke on their own pieces of their lungs. Farmers tried to improvise gas masks out of burlap sacks soaked in vinegar, but it just wasn't enough. The air that day became poison itself. The initial government report said about 4,000 people died, but that number alone is staggering for a 5-day event. But according to modern research, looking at long-term respiratory failure in the months that followed this event puts the death toll closer to 12,000 people.
The government at first kind of not blew it under the table, but pushed it there, and they said that the deaths occurred because of influenza. This way, they didn't have to fully deal with the pollutants and stuff like that. And the main reason for this was, first off, economically. Back then, this is 7 years after World War II ended, so they're still in that rebuilding process economically. coal was the major source of economy in Britain, as well as it was the only source of heat that they had. So being able to have to take away coal was seen as like an impossibility for that. So overall, that alone was the main reason that they pushed that under the table. But politically speaking, having to change the infrastructure from coal to everything would take at least years to do. By then, the smog would be gone and it'd be pushed under the table even more. Having to change that infrastructure through all the votes and things like that would completely ruin the economic landscape of that current establishment of Britain at the time after World War II.
But the even crazy part is that most of the victims were the vulnerable, either the very old, the very young, or those who had already had weakened lungs from the years of living in an industrial city. They didn't die from the fog itself. It was the symptoms that followed: inflamed lungs and acid burning their airways as pieces of their lungs came up as they coughed. This wasn't just some rare weather phenomenon, but a mass casualty event hidden in plain sight. Even though this event was horrifically tragic, the Great Smog was a massive turning point for the modern world. It forced a conversation that we still struggle with today, the idea that we are all responsible for the atmosphere we share. Before 1952, fog was seen as a natural part of London's identity, a romanticized backdrop for Dickens's novels or Sherlock Holmes mysteries. But after 1952, that romance was dead. The fog was recognized as what it truly was: industrial negligence. Even after this tragic event, it took 4 years of political fighting to pass the Clean Air Act of 1956, which was a radical piece of legislation. For the first time, the government told its citizens to stop burning coal in their homes. As we look at our own cities, the lesson from 1952 feels hauntingly unfinished. Our pollutions are more sophisticated now. We don't see yellow pea supers or the soot, but massive piles of garbage drifting through the ocean. But I think the 1952 smog serves as a reminder that air is a fragile, finite resource, is the ultimate commons, something that belongs to everyone and no one at the same time. It reminds us that we are all physically connected to the very thing we usually ignore.